Buddhism and the Fear of COVID-19. A chat with Ajahn Suchin Borihan Wanaket and DJ Banchon Wichiensi, host of a radio program loosely translated into English as Sipping Coffee Beside the Forum. Prince of Songkhla University radio station, Hat Yai Campus, Thailand. Saturday, the 21st of March, 2020. Translated into English by Rodrigo Aldana, assisted by Trin Pongpetra, Anne Marshall, and Azita Gill.
Ajahn Suchin, today in Thailand and around the world, there is huge anxiety and dread about COVID-19. We don't know what is happening or where it will lead. It could be a mild illness or very serious and result in death. There have been a number of cases of COVID-19 in southern Thailand. Thai people worry about encountering the illness when they come here from other areas of the country. Crime, accidents, and illness are dangers that surround us all the time. Now, in the midst of current fears about COVID-19, how are we to consider what is happening from the Buddhist perspective?
Let me ask you, in the truest sense, is anyone able to prevent COVID from occurring? We have to consider carefully to understand the root causes of things and realize that we have no understanding whatsoever that there is no one to do anything. Whatever arises does so by conditions. It seems simple. However, this truth is very subtle and profound. Whether there is danger or not, there must be seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking arising and falling away all the time, right? These cannot be stopped. If we cannot control even these realities, then how can we control the experiencing of harm? There is no one to do or control anything. The only thing is to understand that things do not happen the way we think they will or want them to. If there is a cause for something to happen in a certain way, it has to happen that way. COVID is a clear example of the timeless truth of realities unfolding by conditions. We need to understand that there is no one who can control. There is no controlling agent. Things can only be the way they are. They cannot be otherwise. When we no longer think of COVID, we will think about other things, and the story about COVID will be just like any other train of thought, gone and forgotten.
Fearing the dangers around us and then avoiding them, is that the correct way to proceed?
There's certainly no way to avoid dangers. If there are precautions to be taken, then by all means take them. However, we need to understand that they may not prevent contracting the virus. The Buddha has shown us the real causes, both near and far, for the arising of phenomena. Without a deep understanding of causation, we will always be fearful. Now we fear COVID, but in the future there will be other diseases. We can be frightened of everything because we don't know the cause for good and bad things to occur. That is, for kusala or akusala. Why does something good happen to one person and something bad to another? Why do only some get COVID and others do not? Fear is certain as long as there is attachment to oneself, right? Having been born in this world, one is fearful of everything. How much fear? Well, that will depend.
When I talk about not being careless, I think in general this means avoiding the dangers we fear, such as accidents, crimes, diseases, illnesses, natural disasters, and so on.
Did those who contracted COVID do anything to try to avoid it? Many did, but they still got it. Others took no steps to avoid it. Some of them got the virus, while others didn't. Near causes are those within view. If we are not careful and do nothing to avoid COVID, we give rise to contracting it. However, there are also far causes. Some people are very careful and still get the virus, while others are not at all careful and don't get it. Why is this?
I've heard that even those who are very cautious get it.
In spite of being careful, we can still become ill if there are conditions for it. If there are no conditions, no matter what, we won't become ill. Our volitional actions, that is, kamma, always bring results. So there is always becoming something, from moment to moment, from life to life. Whatever happens, be it happiness or suffering, it's not going to be good all the time, or distress all the time. Some people may have physical pain and no mental suffering. Others may experience great emotional pain and have no physical pain. If we don't know about causation, we cannot know which causes bring about good and bad results.
It seems like we don't have to do anything at all, because if something happens, it has to happen. It seems that there's no need to try to avoid anything or be cautious, but isn't this being careless?
You're already thinking incorrectly. In ignorance, we think, if that is the case, then I don't have to do anything. We don't think about being a good person and doing good. These are things that bring about good results.
Right.
When looking at common causes for getting the virus, we think only about things we can do to prevent it. We overlook the real causes. If the cause is kusala, the result will definitely be good. If the cause is akusala, no matter what we do, the result will be bad. Why are some born with no disease or handicap, but others are born with both? We may think we will die from one thing, but in the end, we die from another. Everyone wishes for good things only, without knowing what brings them about. It's a timeless truth that kusala always produces good results, and akusala always produces bad results. We forget this and think, in that case, I don't have to do anything. That moment of thinking is definitely not kusala, because we don't understand what ought to be cultivated.
So is it akusala if we think we don't have to do anything, just let it go?
Yes, this is wrong thinking, not doing anything. See? The akusala just goes on and on, because there's no correct understanding that abandoning things to chance, or doing nothing, is not kusala. Like right now with COVID, people are helping each other, taking care of each other, not harming each other. During times like this, kindness and other kusala deeds make things easier, little by little. On the other hand, the more akusala, the worse things get. People tend to forget or fail to see that kusala and akusala speech and actions are the true causes of good and bad results. Instead, we think merely about protecting ourselves, but does this lead to protection against akusala?
How can we evaluate what is kusala? I've heard people disagree about what is kusala and what is not.
Kusala for those who have not listened to the Buddha's teachings, and kusala for those who have listened, must be different, right?
Yes.
We need to listen to the teachings in order to know the depth of the meaning of causation. Even at this very moment, there is the hearing of a sound. Can we stop ourselves from hearing that sound?
Impossible.
Everything seems to occur by itself or on its own. But in truth, it's not like that at all. There are sounds in the forest, sounds far away, sounds in different rooms. But the sound that we hear can only be the particular sound that impinges on the ear sense. Only the hearing of that sound will arise, not any other sound. This is very subtle, and therefore it's extremely difficult to know whether the sound heard is the result of kusala or akusala action. If we could split time into tiny momentary fragments, we would find alternating moments of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, arising and falling away very quickly throughout the day. Nothing static or permanent. This happens so rapidly that it appears as if they are all joined together, making it impossible to see what is arising or what is passing away. Just now we are talking about this story, and next we'll talk about another story. You see? The story we have just talked about is completely gone. The story of COVID is just one story. If we are in deep sleep, we don't know or see anything. But as soon as we wake up, we start worrying because of self-love. We worry about ourselves, others, or anything else. However, I think that if everyone understood kusala and performed kusala deeds, we would not be afraid of anything.
This means that the real danger to be known is not what people are fearing now. We are only afraid of external factors, afraid of change. Am I right?
Yes, everyone is afraid of COVID, but not everyone will get it. It will come only to those with the conditions to get it. Otherwise, everyone would have it by now. Regardless of what happens to each person, there must be causes specific to that person. It is very complex, but gradually we can consider and understand what we really fear. As long as there is birth, there will be fear. We have been afraid since birth. No one is unafraid. The fears need not be great. They can be of simple things, like geckos and ants. There is fear because we don't understand what we are afraid of. Is there any good in being afraid? Isn't it better not to be afraid because we understand what it is that we fear?
So what are we really afraid of, or why are we afraid?
In fact, I think it should be ignorance about reality. At this moment, there's only ignorance. Thus we are afraid, even though the object of fear has gone. When we stop talking about COVID-19, will there still be fear even though such thought has gone? Some will still fear, but others, with different things to think about, won't think about COVID anymore. We fear because we don't understand the reality appearing at each moment, how it appears, and what causes it to appear. Why is this country, this person, or this thought the way it is? Everything. We don't know the causes for the arising of phenomena. You may be wondering what we're talking about here. If we try to consider the truth carefully, we can go beyond fear by understanding that if something is going to happen, it must happen. If it is not going to happen, it will not happen. There's no one to make it happen. There must be causes for things to happen to one person and other causes for things to happen to another, all according to the many and diverse conditioning factors that arise for each person.
If fear arises again, it is not the same fear that arose and disappeared before. Fear can arise and disappear again and again, am I right?
Yes, there's absolutely nothing at all that does not cease. We understand that cease means come to an end. Here we use cease to mean come to an end, never to return. Fallen away means the same thing. What has ceased or fallen away cannot be found anywhere. Like the sound heard just a moment ago, as soon as it falls away, it is impossible to find it again. Then we forget about it when a new sound arises and falls away. This is how the truth is concealed, moment by moment.
If that is the case, what's the real danger?
Defilements, ignorance. Would the Arahat be afraid of COVID?
From what I've read and listened to, he would not be afraid.
As the Arahat has no defilements, he's not shaken by anything because he knows that there are specific causes for every result. If the cause exists and the conditions are complete for the result,
Morning, Nina. Morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Morning, Jyotika, Carmen, all the early birds. Morning, Betty.
Hello, Sarah. There was just a wonderful audio recording of Buddhism and the Fear of COVID that Anne was narrating, and she was reading from the book, and it was so wonderful to listen to. It was just up before we tuned in, before we were on air. So that was really, really good. This is I don't know if you have a copy. Do you have a copy of it, Sarah? Buddhism.
Yes, I think it's the translation Roti did, which he posted on DSG in parts because we were helping with it. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure it's the same one, but I think
he was asking questions and we were helping, and then he was posting extracts. I think
really, really, really well.
I just looked on the website. It's on the first page. I saw that it's posted there. So
same one. Yes.
The Dhamma Home website, right?
Yes.
So it's an audio recording of it, of the narration, right? It's an audio.
Yes, it's the audio recording of the translation of the talk of Ajahn on COVID. Yes.
Very, very nice.
Morning, Sukin. Morning, everyone. Trin. Nopadam. Tam.
Hello, Kun Sarah.
Sawadika, how are you, Trin?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. Are you still in the south of Thailand?
Yes, we're still in the south. It's there's still many cases here in Thailand. Delta is spreading quite fast.
Quite a serious situation. Yes.
Yes. So hope everything's well on your side and everyone's.
Yes, we're in quarantine, so we're very safe at the moment.
If the cases of COVID increase every day.
Still? Oh, wow.
And how about the Thai discussions, Trin? Are they going well?
Yes, Thanachan is discussing online a bit more with the individual groups. I'm not sure whether Kunem or how you're recording them. I'll try to find a link and share it for those who are inclined to listen.
Morning, Gabby, Alberto. Lots of early birds this morning. Tadao.
Morning. Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Gabby.
Hello, Gabby.
ค่ะเรียบร้อยแล้วค่ะ
Sawadika, Ajahn.
สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับอาจารย์
สวัสดีครับอาจารย์ครับ
สวัสดีครับอาจารย์ สวัสดีครับ everybody
พูดเลยค่ะ Please carry on.
Ajahn, a few weeks ago, you talked about chitta as the innermost, but I have a little trouble with the word innermost because it seems to, for some people, it seems to suggest the self and it's innermost like a heart. So I'm not quite sure about this term.
Nina, can you repeat that again, please?
Chitta as the innermost. I have trouble with the word innermost.
Oh, innermost.
Because we have to understand what we are talking about, whether we are talking about Nama or the Rupa. When we talk about Chitta as the innermost, it means that no matter when and any time, there must be the reality, which is the chief of experiencing. So it is the innermost, while the other factors like cetasikas sometimes arise with it and sometimes it does not arise with it. So it's not as innermost as citta because it's there all the time. And cetasika, even it arises with citta, but it arises with the innermost. Can that be studied to begin to realize the difference between citta and cetasika? They are not the same. Even they experience the same object arising together, experience the same object, fall away together, and arise at the base, the same base, one rupa at that very moment. But still, what are there? What is the chief, the innermost of all must be the citta, which is there all the time, arising and falling away unknown. So even right now, even citta is the innermost. There can be the thought, thinking about cetana, see, or other citta, like attachment and aversion, are there all the time as the owner of the house, but they come and go away. So citta is there as the innermost, in that sense that it's different from cetasikas. Even they arise together. They cannot be separated, but they are different. So among the citta and cetasika, what should be the innermost?
And Nina, I think the point is also that the innermost is just a conditioned reality, not what we would otherwise have thought would be the innermost. And you said it, that some people think of a self as the innermost.
Yeah.
And that is the point, that the innermost is actually just a conditioned reality that rises and falls away.
How does that differ from an outermost?
Say again?
How does that differ from an outermost? An outermost, wouldn't that be conditioned as well? For instance, a cetasika is conditioned as well, isn't it?
That's correct.
So how can we see the difference by just explaining that an innermost is conditioned? That doesn't show us a difference between an innermost and an outermost.
No, but Nina's point was that the term innermost was causing difficulty because it makes people think of a self or a soul, which is what they normally take to be the innermost thing.
Well, I think the problem is too, is differentiating between what is considered innermost and what is considered outermost. And I think by saying it's the innermost or conditioned, we're not showing how that's different from the outermost.
Well, they don't talk about outermost, as far as I know, just innermost and outer.
As I understand from what Ajahn just explained, the innermost are the ones that arise more regularly, they're more important. So, but I still don't, I for one, when Nina asked that, I for one don't really understand innermost and outermost, because by using those terms, we're thinking in terms of something that is inside and something that's outside, and maybe some other terminology has to be used instead.
That's why if there's no understanding of Dhamma, if there's no understanding of reality as conditioned, whatever we hear about innermost, it will be wrongly taken. It'll be wrongly taken for a self or a core or something there. So that's why the study always has to begin with the study of Dhamma. But when there is more understanding of Dhammas as conditioned, and then step by step, we begin to appreciate the distinction between citta and cetasikas, and why citta is referred to as hadiya or innermost because it is the leader. Then it becomes clearer. But if there isn't the understanding at the very beginning about conditioned dhammas, it will all be confused and misunderstood for sure.
I know, perhaps in my case, I'm not sure, but I understand that both of them are conditioned. So I don't understand why conditioning will just differentiate between something that's innermost and something that's outermost.
Well, they have different functions.
No, Betty, I think what John was trying to convey to Nina was that, as Sarah was saying, if there's no understanding about dhammas, then we tend to take concepts in as inner and outer. We think in terms of concepts.
Yes, but that still doesn't.
With that in mind, John was reminding Nina that when we're talking about inner and outer in terms of realities, it's different. We're talking about realities, not about people. You know, right. How we normally take as things being outer and inner, and that's what he's saying. When in Dhamma, it still comes down to realities being inner and outer.
Okay, but so what is the difference?
I didn't hear the last part.
What is the difference then between inner and outer realities?
As Achan was trying to say, that compared between Chitta and Chaitasika, the two, if one was to be inner compared to the other, the Chitta would be inner compared to the Chaitasika.
I understand that.
And although the Chitta itself is inner compared to visible object, but innermost is Chitta.
Okay, instead of saying innermost, because that implies a location, instead of saying innermost, why don't we say important or less important, perhaps?
Well, sometimes we say it's the leader. So it's the leader in experiencing.
That I understand. Okay, in terms of Jitta and Jettasika, but what about realities?
See, that's why John was trying to point out to Nina, is that normally in daily life, we do take, for example, that inner means me, my experience, right? We refer to that my experience. But in Dhamma, what is it that we take for me? Is right? So amongst that we take for me, the innermost is Chitta.
Okay, I know that, but I'm not talking about taking it from my experience. I'm asking for when this terminology is constantly used to describe different realities. I'm just talking in terms of realities now. When this terminology is used, inner and outer, it is unclear as to what really is the difference between a reality which is considered inner and a reality which is considered outer.
It's not going to be clear without understanding, and it is going to take a long time for that level of understanding. However, it's as of now, it's pointing to the difference between Chitta and Chaitasika, which we know to rise together, condition each other.
Right. This I understand, between differences and so forth between Jitta and Jettasika. But and I understand that the Jitta is the leader. It's the most foremost reality as opposed to Jettasika. Okay, I understand that. But why this constantly referring to these two as inner and outer rather than say something else? Jitta is the leader, we know that. But what about other realities? Because they talk about inner realities and other realities and outer realities. They don't just talk about Jitta and Jettasika. So
yes, they do talk about different other realities as well. So there are rupas also.
So what's the difference?
Rupas are also outer compared to Chitta Chaitasika. So
absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I would agree with that, but totally, no question about that. But if you're talking to, say, a beginner, and you say, well, these are inner realities and these are outer realities, it's not clear to the beginner what you're really saying when we use the terminology inner and outer.
And Nina isn't a
They-
beginner.
these particular realities are more important in terms of understanding than these other realities, perhaps something like that. But
Yeah, so it was a question from Nina, who is not a beginner.
who's not what?
Who's not a beginner.
That's right. I know Nina is certainly not a beginner, but
Well, there are many things in the Dhamma, Betty, that to a beginner, to someone who's hasn't had any contact with the Dhamma before, would
Right, I
seem
know that.
puzzling
But I'm
and
saying-
strange.
But what I'm also saying is, I know for me, when the term inner and outer was used for quite a long time, I took it to mean, say, that rupa would be considered outer and nama would be considered inner, but it's not quite as simple as that.
No, and if we're talking about the ayatanas, for example, there are those rupas which are inner ayatanas.
Yes.
The eye sense, ear sense, the sense spaces are inner ayatanas, and the rupas that are experienced, visible objects, sound, and so on, through the sense doors are outer ayatanas. So we just need to consider the reason, and chitas are inner ayatanas, and
Yes.
cetasikas are outer ayatanas. So these are common expressions in the text, so one has to consider again and again what the meaning is, what the reason is. Otherwise, it will be misunderstood for sure. And of course, it has to be pointing to the understanding of dhammas as dhammas. Otherwise, like Nina said, people read it and completely misunderstand, take it for a inner self or something like that.
Right, because of the use of that terminology.
So the reason it's discussed is because this is what the Buddha taught. This is what we
but
come
I mean,
across.
They perhaps should have used another term instead of inner and outer, simply because
It-
it's more misunderstanding.
Yeah, I mean, Betty, there are so many classifications of dhammas. There are so many classifications. This is yet another one, and we can slowly come to understand it. Like Sarah alluded to there a moment ago, we've got the ajatika rupas, or the internal rupas, which are the 5 pasada rupas, and you've got the bahira rupa, which are the other 23. So if we don't appreciate that they point to realities, then we will miss out on development of understanding. So it's just,
I know that.
I wouldn't.
But it's still not, it's still.
Yeah, I wouldn't be.
Not getting to the. I guess maybe I'm not making myself clear enough, but it's still not getting to the point. I guess. These all concern realities, not self. We know that. We at least we know this intellectual level. But so I think perhaps what you're saying is that with increased understanding, I will understand the difference much better. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think you're doing well. I think you're doing well enough. I mean that, and I just think there are a lot of dhammas that have so many different classifications, and in time we become a little bit more clearer with them. We start off with nama and rupa, which is one classification. We move on to Paramatta Dhammas, which is yet another classification. There are just dozens and dozens of others.
Yeah, exactly. Because this particular differentiation between inner and outer has always, that's why when Nina brought it up, I said immediately, yes, is differentiating between inner and outer instead of saying perhaps important or more or lesser important.
Well, and
closer to understand.
Well, when you think of the Visuddhimagga, that's based on teasing out the difference between the inner and the outer, the tangle that we're all in. And by these discussions, we learn to sort of little by little to unpick and tease out the different realities by degrees with help of good friends. But I agree with you. It's not easy, and sometimes people can have misunderstandings or be misled or even confused. And then it's up, like you are doing, to ask questions to try and tease out all the different types of realities, which ultimately these different terms relate to.
Yeah, exactly. To understand, at least at an intellectual level, what the terms are at this point, what the terms really mean at this point.
Well, yeah. this is part of pariyatti, if you like, and we have to understand that it has to be the understanding that those dhammas that we're talking about relate to a reality.
It all has to depend on the development of understanding of it. That's for sure.
That's right, and I agree with you. In the beginning, at any stage, really, it can be confusing and not easy to sort out. But this is what we've got good teachers and good friends for, to slowly tease out these different dhammas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Betty, one thing I think is good to remember, that no matter what the classification, regardless of who we understand or not, the Buddha gave those classifications not just, for no reason. He gave them because it reflects a certain aspect of that reality. So when we talk about inner and outer ayatanas, it is an aspect of chitta, cetasika, and other paramatha dhammas, conditioned dhammas
associated with consciousness.
Yeah, and that aspect can be understood with panya as it grows. It's not like the Buddha just said it for no reason, and we can choose to hear only some aspect and not another, and think that, oh no, this doesn't make sense, and why not talk in another term? If you don't understand, it's fine. It's because we don't understand.
Yeah, like suppose consciousness, we know that chitta and cetasika are they have to arise together, but chitta is inner ayatana and cetasika are outer ayatana.
I know this already. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that what I need is to further understand just between what they mean by inner and what they mean by outer.
Yeah. Like for example, chitta and cetasika arise together and know the object, but chitta is inner because chitta is a leader, and cetasika also know, but cetasika is not leader. Cetasika cannot perform function as chitta is, which is chief in knowing the object. That's why chitta is the innermost and the cetasika is the outer one, although they arise together.
Well said, Harji. Very nicely said.
Can we talk about it just a little more in order to have a little more understanding, to understand the difference between chitta and citasikas? Because they can experience the object. So how can there be the explanation for the difference between these two? That's why even the word about it is very, very hard, very difficult to understand. But it has some meaning. Why it's the inner and why it's the outer, even they are there together. But what condition, what has achieved? Which experiences an object right there. And the other, the cetasikas, cannot perform the function of chitta. It cannot be the chief of just experiences the object, no matter how a little slight difference of the object is. But only chitta can perform that function. It really experience as a chief of experience the characteristic of that which appears. That is its function. It has only one function, just at moment of experiencing an object. So can there be a little more understanding of the difference between one? It's there. Experiences only one characteristic, one function, and the others, depending on the characteristic and function and conditions, whether it can arise, it's conditioned to arise with such and such different moment of chitta. But what is there? The chitta is always there. And at this moment, for example, what can be known? I mean, what the Dhamma can be known. What kind of Dhamma can be known right now? Even we talk about Citta as that which is achieved of experiencing the object, and the other characteristic cannot be Citta. It has its own characteristic and its own function, and it arises sometimes with this Citta and the other time with other Citta, different realities. So what is always there, very inner there, that any factors or mental factor Cetasika arises with it for some time. And there are 7 Cetasikas which is conditioned to arise with that, to condition any moment of that which arises to experience an object. So just follow the word and try to understand the meaning of it little by little, just to understand what is there now, which is Citta, and that which is not Citta, but it's there. Because when we talk about what is there in a day, nobody think about Citta at all. Just think about hatred or like or dislike or shape and form or music and so on. What about the Citta? That which is there, very, very down deep inside, that it's not known, because people just keep on talking about other things, not the Citta at all. For example, they talk about seeing and hearing, music, or story. But what is that? What is the insider, or that which is the innermost at that very moment? No one knows. That's why this verse is used to try to understand the characteristic of a reality which arises to experience an object. We don't talk about other nama, Phassa, Vedana, Sanya, Chetana, and so on. Just talk about that characteristic, that it's there all the time. The innermost is there. And the other thing can appear and be talked about when it's there. But who talk about Citta? Even it's there. So very deep down, innermost, just understand the difference between Dhammas, that which is Citta and that which is Cetasika, not Citta, to understand actually that no one there at all. In truth, just to understand. When there is the understanding of the characteristic of a reality, which just experiences each moment in life from birth to death, it's there. Who knows? But it's there. We just talk about other things, but not about that which is there. So that is a kind of the innermost of all, Nama Dhammas. Just to understand the truth, that's all. We don't mind about the word, but any word which can lead to understanding the truth of that characteristic, that is so very precious to hear about it, to know, in order to understand the truth of that which is the innermost, the Citta. If we don't use that, all right, okay, if there can be the understanding of it, as now it experiences and Cetasikas arises with it, different characteristic, different function, but that function of experiences is there. That's all. To understand that even the nama, the characteristic which can experience an object, must be different. That's why there is only Citta and 52 Cetasikas to condition many different Cittas. But Citta is Citta itself, not Cetasika at all. So we don't mind about any word which can condition the understanding a little more of that which is now appearing. But the object appears. What about the Citta? Does it appear now as object? And in a day, does any Citta appears as the object? But Cetasika can be known. Anger is there. And what about Citta with anger? It's there, unknown. So the outer can be known, can be experienced, can be talked about. But what about that? The citta now. Who talks about it? So when it's the way it is, can we use the word innermost? Or if you don't use it, doesn't matter at all, as long as there is the understanding of the truth of it. That's all. Just understand the truth. It's there, experiences all the time, from moment to moment, different ones, by conditions. It cannot be changed to appear as different, as anger or like, hatred, attachment.
That's true. That's a lot. That's true. Thank you so much, Ajahn. That clarified it a lot for me.
And there can be understanding when there is this moment.
I have a question. Are the Cetasikas communicating with each other? Or is the citta like the avenue or the pathway through which they communicate, if at all?
Is that the idea of the thought about citta and citasikas? Or about just one by one? What is citta and what is cetasika? And understand better, they arise together in a moment. What are they? What kind of cetasikas? But only one citta. For example, what is there now? See, do we have to think about the story? Or what is there is the object which appears, but no understanding of the truth of it. Because when there is the understanding of the reality, no word at all. But now we are talking about that which is now appearing, but it does not appear as the object. So understand what appears as it is. For example, at this moment of seeing, not thinking about anything, because the truth is that there is that which is there. One is seen, and the other is that which sees. At that very moment, only one moment at a time. They arise together by conditions. They are different. So they cannot be taken for anyone or anything, because just one single moment, how short it is, how subtle it is, because it's gone already. It doesn't matter at all, because everything has to be just like this, arising and falling away so very rapidly. And the sanya marks and remember it all the time as something, even now thinking about this or that. What about the understanding? It's not just a word, but the words lead to study and develop the understanding of the truth, little by little, until it appears as different ones. That which seen is not that which experiences the object which is seen. No story, long story, but from hearing and considering about one reality at a time. That which experiences is what we take for seeing. We use the term seeing, but the reality of that moment is a reality arisen by conditions, its proper conditions, to just arise to see and then gone, never to arise again in samsara, not just only in this life, but in samsara. And this is so true. And the difference of many realities arising there. Chitta cannot be cetasika. So at this moment, even the word seeing, the characteristic of seeing, that which experiences is not studied enough to have it appear as it is, as that which there is nothing, only the experiencing, no shape, no form at all.
And Wilhelm, another way of considering your question would be to to note that that every cetasika has the function of experiencing the object, the same object that citta experiences, but they do so in different ways according to their specific function. And it's only a momentary thing. And so they only have that one main purpose, to experience the object.
And when the cetasikas arise together with the citta, they all condition each other. So we can call this communicating, if you like, but actually it's just conditioning each other. So when dosa arises, it flavors the other cetasikas that arise with it. It conditions the citta and the sanya and the passa and all the other cetasikas to be unwholesome at that moment. So all the cetasikas and citta that arise together, they all condition each other in different ways, so that the citta that arises with dosa is different from the citta that arises with kindness. The sanya that arises with dosa is different from the sanya that arises with kindness, and so on. And on the point about the innermost, I think it's also a good point that Ajahn touched on, that what is innermost, the citta, is that which is close and deep and hidden, not known. And it's the same with eye sense and the other sense spaces, so close but so hidden. The visible object is more apparent, the sound is more apparent, but the eye sense and the ear sense are very close and hidden, unknown. But without that eye sense, there couldn't be the experiencing of the visible object and the sound and so on.
And Wilhelm, I'll just add that the cetasikas that arise with the citta, they each perform their own function, such as if there's not one, then the other cannot arise and perform its function. However, they don't know of the presence of the other. They just arise to perform their function.
Because the object for one consciousness at the moment is only one at a time. But citta and cetasika arise all the time.
Can you explain that a little more about one at a time? I mean, there are the Sampayutta Dhammas, I mean, at least the 7 cetasikas that arise with every citta. I mean, they arise simultaneously, I assume, no?
Right. What he's saying is the object is always the same. It's the one experience, one object that's experienced by the citta and all the cetasikas.
Yeah.
At a moment of seeing, visible object is experienced by the seeing. The seeing just experiences the visible object. It doesn't know anything about passa or sanya, and the passa just contacts that visible object. It doesn't know anything about concentration or attention, because it just focuses on that one object, and the feeling just feels neutral in this case with regard to the object. So they all just experience the object and condition each other but all that there is experiencing or knowing about is the object experienced.
Okay,
one at a time.
Maybe it's naive of me to think that somehow they are coordinated within the citta, that the citta then, you know, gets the information sort of that what's happening and can do its job. I don't know. Is that a way of basically, I should maybe explain why I come to the information part. The word cetasika, in my understanding, is a qualification of the citta. No, it's in other words, it's an attribute. Cetasika is not a noun; it's an attribute. So you know, I would assume that's an attribute of the citta. So if I'm, I don't know if I'm right or not.
The Buddha taught that there are four realities: citta, cetasika, rupa, and nibbana. So cetasika is a different reality to citta. So that's why phassa is a different reality to citta. It's a cetasika, not an attribute of citta. And when you talk about coordinating, cetana is another cetasika that arises at every moment. And it is the cetasika that has that function of coordinating or rustling all the other nama dhammas together at that moment. So whatever function is performed, it is the function of a cetasika, not anything other than the cetasika performing that function at that moment. But we cannot say that cetana is an attribute of citta. It's a different reality with a different function, experiencing the same object as the citta it arises together with.
Mm-hmm. So, but what is the, let's say, the relation between the citta and the cetasikas in terms of when they have done their function, or let's say they have done their function, or they are doing their function, and in that moment, is the citta in some way affected? I mean, obviously it's affected, isn't it?
They all condition each other when they arise. So at the moment of seeing, the cetasikas arise, they condition the citta, and the citta conditions them. They condition each other, and then they all fall away together. At the moment of anger, they arise together, they condition and affect each other, and then fall away instantly, never to return. So they always arise together, and they always affect each other, and then fall away instantly. No matter kusala, akusala, vipaka, or kiriya, cittas always arise together with the cetasikas, conditioned in the same way. If the citta is vipaka, the cetasikas arising with it are vipaka. If the citta is kusala, the cetasikas arising with it are kusala, and condition each other and the citta in a kusala way, and then gone.
So Sarah, just 1 minute, Sundara. So Sarah, could we say that it's also helpful to study about different kinds of conditions? Because what you've just said reminded me about, say, the difference between root condition and other condition, and only 6 dhammas that can act as root condition, the others cannot. So because of different kinds of conditions, different cetasikas are conditioned in different ways.
Exactly. So all the cetasikas and citta together all condition each other by Sahajata, connasance, but like you say, only the 3 akusala roots of lobha, dosa, and moha conditioned by root condition, and only alobha, dosa, amoha conditioned in a kusala way by root condition. So gradually becoming more familiar with the different conditions at this moment, it helps to understand why the citta, for example, with anger is different from the citta with kindness, how it is conditioned, and how no one can do anything, but it is the nature of cittas and cetasikas to condition each other in many different ways, by mutuality and yamanya, by many different conditions. And this is the way how we understand that cetasikas are different realities, not attributes of cittas, and how the nature of citta is affected by the cetasikas it arises with. I think we discussed before how citta itself is pure pandara, but it's affected by the akusala cetasikas when they arise and make it dirty, impure at that moment, sully it.
And also cetasikas accumulate. So attachment, for example, of a particular kind accumulates by arising and repeated and accumulates at each arising. And they each accumulate in their own way. So attachment accumulates more attachment and aversion accumulates more aversion. So they're, in that sense, they're quite independent of each other.
I think last week we talked about the sanya, the tira sanya, the firm remembering. So when there's understanding now, the tira sanya remembers what the truth is, what the nature of reality is. And then later it conditions a sati and understanding to arise, to experience the truth again and again. So we see how these realities all condition each other. And when we read about concentration and understanding, we see how they have to develop together, conditioning each other. And the same with any of the other path factors. Carry on, Sundara.
I was just going to say, Wilhelm, that those, the Chitta and Cetasika, they arise together. And Sarah's just spoken of that. I was going to mention it, but nevertheless, I'll continue. By way of Sahajata, she mentioned the word connasance. I often wonder how helpful some of those words are, but it just means Saha means with, Jata means with birth. So they arise simultaneously. They arise together to condition one another by way of that pachya, by way of by way of Sahajata. It just means, simultaneously arising together. And we have there's lots of different words, and sometimes we have these words like connasance, which just means the same birth, literally. Nascence. Actually, we get that word in the word renaissance, which means a rebirth. But so they rise together, so we can see that they condition one another. They are very, very different very, very different realities, as Sarah's spoken to. They are unique in that sense that they comprise the four ultimate realities. Chitta and Cetasika are the two of them, and of the other two. So I know what you mean, that they are connected in certain ways, but they each have their own particular characteristics, manifestations, proximate causes, and functions. So it's just they are very different. But I can see where your question's coming from, I think, and it's just that they are related by all sorts of conditions, but they are unique in their own particular way of manifestation.
I would like to add, when I'm thinking about this information thing, I'm mainly thinking of the 7 main cetasikas, not those like anger and stuff. With that, it's more clear that it's like something external or something, in itself, so to speak. Whereas with the 7, those 7 always there.
Universals,
let's say,
yeah.
Excuse me. Please.
Yeah, Wilhelm, as we've always often heard, that the chitta is the chief in experiencing. So it just experiences the object clearly. It does not perform the function of contact, the function of concentrating, or the function of coordinating or feeling. These are functions of the other the cetasikas. And the idea of the 7 universal cetasikas is that in the 10 sense door experiences, which have the least number of cetasikas, all these 7 have to be there. One can't be missing. And any other cetasika, apart from this, there have to be other cetasikas added on. So these cetasikas are there to perform their own function. Like a phassa cannot contact if there was no chitta. And chetana cannot coordinate if there was no phassa to contact. And vedana cannot feel if there was no chetana to coordinate or chitta to experience clearly the object. So this is what those 7 cetasikas is about, the minimum in any experience.
Thank you very much. I will have to hear this again. I think it's very important for my furthering study, let's say. If I may say, I have now no proof of it, or I cannot refer to the exact moment. Ajahn actually said in a previous talk that cetasikas are in the citta. So
that actually points to that inner cetasikas being inner. I mean, the innermost is citta. And because there are 7 at the minimum, and the others cannot be without the chitta, and these 7, that cetasikas as a whole are considered the outer. Every cetasika. Is that what you? Yeah.
I think that what you may have heard, and I also find it a little bit difficult too, is the cetasikas now, like the cetasikas with seeing, arise together with seeing. The cetasikas that arise with citta when angry arise together with the citta. They're different realities. But when we talk about the accumulation of anger or the latent tendencies, we talk about the accumulation of the asya, anusya, or the latent tendencies in the citta, which are accumulated, ready to condition the arising of those cetasikas and citta later. So you may have heard Ajahn talking about the accumulation of the tendencies in the citta.
Okay, thank you.
Were you about to speak, Ajahn?
We can't hear you yet, Ajahn.
Sorry. I think that when we think about the word, it cannot be clear at all. But when it applies or convey the meaning of this moment, there can be the beginning of understanding the difference of each reality. For example, we know that there is citta, we use that term, and there is also rupa and cetasikas. See, they are there as they are, just one characteristic cannot be mixed with other at all. For example, citta cannot be cetasika. It cannot perform the function or the characteristic of any cetasikas at all, because it is just citta, a reality, cannot be other thing at all. And what is it? It's only that it arises and experience an object. Otherwise, there cannot be anything appear at all. That's why we begin to understand citta before we can understand cetasika, because it's there, unknown. But when we talk about moment of the arising of a moment of citta, we talk about what are there, not only citta, but there must be conditions, the reality, which condition the citta arising at that very moment too. And what are they? They must be that which can experience, but it cannot be the chief of experiences, the object clear. Because, for example, when citta experiences the object clear as it is, clear means well, or its function is just to experience. And what is meant by just experience, it cannot be attachment or anger or anything. Its function is to arise and experience the object. What is there cannot be known as anything, but it's only that which is experienced. Because the citta arises, performs the function of experience, no matter what is there. And we don't talk about cetasika, we talk about citta, and then there can be more understanding that any reality which arises cannot arise by itself, and it has to have conditions for its arising. So what is there? Together, condition the moment of a citta arising. There must be cetasika. Who knows if Buddha didn't teach about the cetasikas and rupa and all? That's why we learn to understand that there must be citta for sure, because the object appears, but what are there cannot be known until we heard about the teachings about phassa cetasika. And what is meant by phassa? It's a reality. It experiences object by way of contact. If it cannot experience, how can it contact that object? So citta arising with it, experience that. This is so very subtle that we have to understand little by little with what word Buddha talk about it. Consider carefully that can cetasika experience the object as citta experience? Impossible. Because since citta experiences that object so clear, not with understanding, but clear to understand the clearness of the object, the cetasika which arises together like attachment can perform the function of attached to that object which it experiences, but not as citta. See, we begin to understand the difference between citta and cetasika. And each cetasika is different by its characteristic, its function, manifestation, and proximate cause.
Hanachan, are you there?
I think we'll
So
let Wilhelm finish.
I
Were you
was
about to say something,
going to
Wilhelm?
ask Wilhelm what, as you see it, is the need for cetasikas to communicate with each other?
Well, I was actually thinking that they would communicate with, that they give the information. Let's say the phassa gives the information of contacting to the citta, and let's say Manasikara, I don't know.
Well, if Phassa performs its function, then there is contact. So it's not as though Phassa has to then tell the citta to make contact.
Yeah, not to make, but that contact has happened, or I don't know.
But when Phassa is there, it has arisen already, and so has citta. So that we must remember that all these mental factors arise at the same instant as the citta itself, and only last as long as the citta itself. They all fall away together too.
Yeah.
So there's no need for contact because everything's performing a function just for a split moment.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Wilhelm, that's right. So they are, when you got Sahajata, by way of Sahajata Pacha, it means they're born at the same time. They're born at the same time. Sahajata literally means that they're born at the same time. They arise together and they disappear together at the same time.
Yeah, okay. So they have to be conceived as, well, different realities. So there are like 7 different realities at the same time arising together with the one reality citta. But isn't there like only one reality can happen at the same time? No.
Not so. No, there's no rule that says there can only be one reality arising at the same time. We may be thinking of what is said that every citta can only have one object. A citta and its jetasikas can only have one object.
Okay.
Like you said earlier, there have to be a minimum of 7 cetasikas arising together with the citta. So they all have to arise together, the citta and all its accompanying cetasikas. Like in the text, they talk about the king and his revenue. The king can only arrive together with his revenue. The citta can only arise with all the other cetasikas at the same moment, experiencing the same one object. At the moment of seeing, the phassa, the concentration, all the other factors arise together with it at the same moment to experience visible object and then fall away together instantly.
And another context of only one at a time is it's said that when there's awareness, there can be awareness of only one reality at a time. So if there's awareness of a citta, for example, then the citta is the object. If there's awareness of a cetasika, such as feeling or anger, then only the cetasika is the object of the awareness at that moment.
Okay. To dispel another possible misconception that I have, would it be right to think of cetasikas as organs of the citta?
Well, they are separate conditioned realities. So they do not belong to the citta in the sense of being an organ of the citta. No.
Okay.
What do you mean by organs of the citta? What does this mean?
Well, I was also thinking, maybe it's a very confusing term. I was actually thinking like, let's say the phassa is like the capacity of the snail to, to touch an object.
I think it's more helpful to think of the cetasikas as distinct, separate realities. So it's not an appendage or an organ or a part of the citta. They're separate realities that by conditions arise together and by conditions fall away. And it depends on conditions how many cetasikas arise at any moment with a particular kind of citta.
And the analogy given in the commentary, I think, in the suttas for the relationship between the citta and cetasikas is like sheaves of wheat or something that keep each other propped up. So that helps us to see that they are separate, yet mutually dependent on each other for their arising, but don't belong to each other.
It's exactly this, similar to when we talk about rupas. A rupa such as hardness cannot arise on its own. It has to arise in a group of a minimum of 8 rupas arising together. We call it a kalapa, a group of rupas, but only one can ever be experienced at a time. So just like it depends on whether a citta or a cetasika appears and is experienced, even though when they arise, they have to arise together. It's the same with rupas. They have to arise together in a group of at least 8 rupas. But at a moment of touching, only one rupa, one hardness or one temperature, one rupa is experienced. But that rupa has been conditioned by the other rupas arising together with it, the other Mahabhuta rupas. And it's the same when a cetasika is experienced or a citta is experienced. Only one reality is experienced, only one reality appears, but that reality, when it arose, had to arise together with other cetasikas and with a citta and fall away with them. So the reason we learn and begin to consider more about the nature of different realities and how they arise and how they condition each other is to really show, like the question Nina brought up at the beginning that people mentioned, why there really cannot be any inner self or core of anything else or any organ or anything there, that there are just different realities arising by particular conditions, conditioning each other, and only one object, one reality, or a concept of a reality can appear at any time. And it's now, it's at this very moment, at the moment of seeing. The seeing has to be supported by the other cetasikas, which condition each other and experience the same object. But when there is understanding of seeing, no thought about phassa or concentration, because only seeing is experienced at that moment of understanding. Or when feeling, a pleasant feeling appears, that feeling had to arise with a citta and other cetasikas, but the moment of understanding, a pleasant feeling, for example, that appears, it's just that feeling that is experienced at that moment. No thought about concentration and the citta and other realities. Okay. So gradually, by learning and considering and understanding about different realities in different ways, like why is it called innermost, or why do they refer to the realities appearing together, gradually the ideas of something there or someone there are gradually worn away to come closer to just understanding there's only Dhamma at this moment, different Nama Dhammas and Rupa Dhammas arising by different conditions.
Would you say that seen as realities, as differentiated realities, that citta and the cetasikas carry the same weight, like they're just, like there is
Right. It's a good
50
question. When there is understanding of reality, it doesn't mind, it has no interest at all in what reality it is to be known, because it's just that which appears. So regardless of whether it's seeing or loba or dosa or kindness, it's just a reality that arises and passes away of no special significance. Even if the reality is understanding or awareness, it's still just for a moment and then gone, not belonging to anyone. So in terms of the development of understanding, it doesn't matter in the slightest what the object is, what the reality to be known is. And appreciating this, or beginning to understand that it's just the understanding of what appears for a moment, is the way that gradually there's the letting go of clinging to understanding particular realities or having particular experiences, because whatever it is just for a moment, gone, not worth clinging to. But that understanding understands that seeing is different from a mental factor that arises with it, because they have different characteristics, different functions. So the nature of realities is different. Metta is different from dosa, but in terms of a moment of understanding or awareness, it makes no difference whether it's metta or dosa or seeing. Whatever appears now can be understood and then gone.
Okay. Thank you. I have an additional question, although it's probably from a different, on a different subject. That's the arising on either Hadaya Rupa or the doorways, isn't it? That seeing, hearing, etc. Those citas arise at the doorways. I just wonder if the fact that they are only associated with the seven basic or universal citasikas has to do with that fact that they arise at the doorway.
We have to distinguish between the base, the vatu, and the doorway, the dwara. So for seeing arises at eye base. Eye base is the vatu, the base, and it's also the doorway, the means by which the other citas in that eye door process experience the object. But the other citas in the eye door process, they arise at the hadya watu, a different base. Only seeing arises at eye base. And the reason that, so seeing only arises with 7 cetasikas, but the next cita, even in that process, has to arise with more cetasikas. Vitaka has to be there to touch the object and so on. Seeing is a weaker cita, it doesn't need the vitaka to touch the object, but the sampatichana, the santirana, and the other citas, they all need more cetasikas, even though they're in the same process. So I think one has to just be clear about the distinction between the base, the vatu, and the doorway. So only seeing arises at eye sense, only hearing arises at ear sense. All the other citas arise at the hadya watu.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clear?
Okay, but is it irrelevant to think that these additional cetasikas, they need the hadaya vatu for its arising place?
It's a good question. I think that the nature of the other citas is that they have to arise at the hadya watu, but the reason they need other cetasikas, like for example, the kusala citas need more cetasikas than the akusala citas, and the kusala and akusala citas need more Chaitasikas and the Sampatichana and Santirana Chitas, which are Vipaka Chitas. So I don't think we can just say it's because of the being at arising at Hadiawatu. The reason I've heard before, but Ajahn may add more, that seeing and hearing only need 7 Chaitasikas is because in order to see or hear as Vipaka, there are weaker Chitas that don't need the Vitaka to touch the object, so they don't need as many Chaitasikas. But even the Sampaticha and Santirana, they don't need the same degree of, they don't need any, of course they are Ahetuka Chitta, so no Sobana, no Kusala, no Akusala Chaitasikas arising with them.
Okay, thank you very much.
And it's easy, I think, to consider the details and which can help clarify points, but to forget that it's this very moment, this moment of seeing, which is just a Vipaka Chitta. So the Pasa and the other factors, they're just Vipaka Chaitasikas, just a result of karma, so different from the Kusala and Akusala Chittas that follow instantly, the attachment that follows immediately. So many more Chaitasikas are involved, and it's all right now. Hearing sound and then attachment instantly.
I have one question about wholesome consciousness. Wholesome consciousness, whether it's kusala or kriya chitta of arahata,
Wholesome sopana.
Sopana, wholesome.
Arya.
Arahant, kriya chitta of arahata.
Kriya, okay. But it's not wholesome.
Wholesome kriya chitta with the wholesome conscious, with the head. What I'm trying to ask is that like wholesome consciousness, right? Like for example, generosity is wholesome, kindness is wholesome, understanding Dhamma is wholesome, and this is a wholesome way. So wholesome consciousness is either wholesome deed in wholesome way. Now my question is that when thinking of like walking or eating food, taking a bath, or doing any other things like this, how are these wholesome? Because like in the case of arhata, they don't have any defilement left. They don't think with unwholesome consciousness. They have only they can think only with wholesome consciousness. But when we think of doing like other thing and all that, how are those things are wholesome? Like aware, wholesome consciousness, sati is there, that aware in a wholesome way. But like doing these activities or whatever, like other example, you get my point. How are those wholesome?
Just before we start, how many Sobana Chittas are there and what are they? Because there's a lot of confusion between terms like wholesome and unwholesome and so on. So how many Sobana Chittas are there, Haji?
I think what I mean is that sopana chitta, but you get my point, right? When we say that sopana chitta, whether it's kusala or kriya chitta or hatha, sopana like chitta is like either in dana, sila, or panya. So now my question is that like walking, eating food, taking a bath, or reading a book, how are these wholesome? Aware, I mean, how are these so like good? Because
I just want I just want to clarify on the sobana because there's so much misunderstanding about the term. So sobana, or usually it's translated as beautiful in English, there are 24 sobana citas, 8 kinds of kusala citas, 8 kinds of kiriya citas of the arahat, and 8 kinds of kusala vipaka citas. They're also sobana. So like last week, someone was asking about sati arising with bhavanga citas, for example. So when it's kusala vipaka, these are also sobana. It means arising with sobana factors like sati and panya and so on. So when we just talk about a situation like taking a bath, it's kind of meaningless because in reality, there's just one citta at a moment. So just like now, we can say conventionally, we're sitting on a chair discussing Dhamma, but in reality, there's just one citta at a moment, kusala, vipaka, or kiriya for a moment. And so in the case of the arahat, no kusala or akusala, just vipaka and kiriya cittas. So for us, it's hard to imagine how they can be sitting here without any akusala cittas, but for the arahat, the akusala has been eradicated. And so there can only be kiriya and vipaka cittas, that's all.
Okay, generosity is kusala, kindness is kusala, restraining from bad speech and wrongdoing is kusala, understanding Dhamma is kusala. Is good, is like kusala. I mean, in this part also reflect to the kiriya citta of arahata. So I just use the word kusala, but I think you can understand. But like walking and all that, like, okay, it may seem that we're talking as a situation, but like thinking of walking or reading a book and all that, I mean, just a moment, how are those kusala?
Intention to walk,
intention to read a book, intention to take a bath, or intention to other things. Like, you get my point.
What about now intention to look up at the computer screen with kusala or akusala citta, just depending. What is the intention?
But kusala is like, Baba, can you ask?
With attachment as usual, or to help at that moment?
I think to put Haji's question in another way is that for an arahata, apart from vipaka citta, seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, and what otherwise in our case is either kusala or akusala. In the case of arahat, does that mean that those chittas fall under the category of either dana, sila, samatha, or panya, right? Is it always that? Even if at the moment of intending to eat something, is that a moment of dana, sila, or understanding always?
Because that's what I'm confused. I have a doubt on that.
What else can it be except for moments of vipaka and moments of sobana and moments of other kiriya cittas like panchadwara vajana? What else can it be?
Sarah, but intending to eat and intending to walk or take a bath or reading a book, how is that either dana, sila, or panya? That's what raised my concern. I have doubt in this. You can understand what my point is, right?
How is it possible to understand the cittas of the arahat, because there's so little understanding now? But what about at this moment? What about at this moment of speaking, or this moment of looking up? moments of kusala, moments of akusala. So if no moments of akusala, what is there?
Kusala. It has
Or what is the purpose of
kusala
eating?
or akusala. I mean,
If there's no lobha when eating, what are the chittas when eating?
If it's not satipatthana, then it must be akusala. That's the conclusion I make.
Not necessarily, because there can be kusala, which is not satipatthana.
All
so
right.
it doesn't
So
mean
what
that
kind of
panya is there
kusala
at
is
every
that?
moment.
So what
Moments
kind
of
of kusala
metta.
is there? What kind of kusala would that be?
What
Because
about at moments of metta? At moments
while
of
eating, while picking up the spoon to put into my
yes,
mouth.
how is that a dance scene or panya? It may seem like that's what we are confused.
when you're eating food, are there never any kusala moments amongst all the lobha and ignorance and dosa? Can there not be moments of kusala?
Yeah. So what kind of kusala?
What kind of kusala? How eating is dan or seal or panya? That's what I'm trying to ask.
There can be moments of metta, there can be moments of consideration for others or respect for others. There can be moments of awareness, moments of understanding.
Right,
anytime.
right. There can be, but
we're talking about an arahat, but what about talking about right now?
There can be, but usually there is not. And in our case, it's usually a kusala. But in the arahat, we know it's never going to be a kusala. So when it can be dana, it can be metta. And what about those other moments when it's not a kusala? What is it?
Because we know that kusala is either dan, seen, or panya. So thinking of
I think it's not, that's just a classification, right? But in the case of the arahat, because all akusala has been eradicated, only sobhana remains to arise. So we don't have to classify it as dana, sila, or bhavana. That's just the way that is. That's all that can arise is sobhana.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy to hear that, so that I don't, Haji doesn't have to think too much now. Yeah, that's because we often hear Ajahn Suchin also telling us that if it's not, in our case at least, that if it's not dana sila, then it must be, whatever is left.
And that's also correct, of course, because the norm for us is akusala. Yeah, but by conditions, by accumulated tendencies, and then, but for the arahat also, because all the akusala has been eradicated, the norm for the arahat is sobhana.
Okay,
but it falls under category.
Oh, no, not necessary.
What is the difference between the two words, sobhana and kusala?
Kusala is referring to kusala chitta, but sobhana is referring to chitta with good good chetasika.
Beautiful
chetasika.
Any chitta which doesn't have a kusala chetasika with it, and when it is not the ahetuka chitta, it has to be kusala, kusala, right? For putujna, and for arhata, no kusala at all. Whatever is asked before becoming arhata is kusala, but after becoming arhata, there's no more condition, the root for the arising of the next life. No patisanti citta anymore. That's why we have to understand the difference between these two words. Sopana, any cetasika, which is beautiful, whatever we use, can arise with citta, right? And akusala can arise with citta, but it depends on conditions. For those who are not arahata yet, still have akusala, and kusala, the root to condition next birth. But for Arahata, even the citta is wholesome as before, but it cannot condition the next life or birth after death at all. That's why for Arahata, what is the wholesome citta, which usually can condition vipaka, doesn't condition vipaka after becoming Arahata. So no matter he wake up or do anything, the citta cannot be akusala and it cannot be kusala either. Otherwise, he has to have vipaka after this life because of the kusala citta after becoming an arahata. But the arahata cannot have kusala citta and he cannot have akusala citta. He has only two kinds of chati, the vipaka from the past deeds and the kriya citta, which is sopana but not kusala. It is only kriya from being before as kusala, becoming kriya, cannot condition any vipaka after becoming arahata. So what he got in this life is the result of previous karma, but it's not after his becoming arahata. No matter what, the pain for the Buddha before his death, conditioned by previous past life, not the life that he had become enlightened as arahata. That's why for the other who is not arahata yet, there has to be for chati, kusala, akusala, vipaka, and kriya. And for arahata, no akusala, no kusala, only vipaka and kriya. So can any arahata have kusala citta?
No.
Because no root, no condition to condition the vipaka after he had become arahata. What he was doing is the kiriya citta and the result vipaka. No more kusala, no more akusala.
Thank you.
So, Achan, in conclusion, we just understand that since the Arahata has eradicated all defilements, no more, and since no more kusla, no more akusla, what replaces has only is kriya. What arises in that is only kriya.
And how many kiriya cittas are there for arahata?
I mean, all type. They have panchatvara. I mean, so which is sopana and which is that does not have beautiful cetasika.
So while he take a bath, what are there?
Sopana citta. Cetasika.
Vipaka and kiriya citta, no akusala, no kusala at all. But it depends on whether there is panya, jnana arising with it, or no panya arising with it. That's why even arahata still have 8 kiriya citta, which before that it is the 8 kusala. Right?
So, Achan, what you're saying is that the Arahata will have chitta, wholesome, not wholesome again. Chitta,
Sobana is wholesome. So sobana can be kusala or vipaka or kiriya.
And without panya also. So
with or without panya.
Yeah.
Because all 8 kinds, so the 8 kinds, 4 with panya and 4 without panya, 4 prompted, 4 unprompted, 4 asankarika, 4 sasankarika. So 8 kinds, 4 with pleasant feeling, 4 with neutral feeling, so all kinds.
And it's useless to think as Haji was thinking that it must fall in the category of either dana, sila, etc. Because what's important is to understand that there's no kusala, there's no akusala roots. That's it.
And it just means that, like when taking a bath, there must be, when it's not sobana vipaka, it must be sobana. When it's not vipaka, it must be the sobana kiriya chitas. And so those either with or without understanding. So it can, those sobana kiriya chitas, you can classify them as dana, sila, bhavana. It includes any sobana kiriya chitas, just like now when we classify kusala chitas as dana, sila, bhavana, it includes all kinds of kusala, but it's just for a moment.
So I'm back to zero again. You're saying you can classify Arahatas chitta as dana, sila, bhavana.
So now it's.
I don't think it's necessary because, as Ajahn explained, they are not kusala jittas, so they're not kinds of kusala, are they? Kinds of kusala must refer to kusala jittas. But now we're talking about sobana jittas.
But what is kusala now, for example, a moment of metta, now, when it is the arahats, it's the sobana kiriya chitta. So all kinds of kusala become all kinds of sobana kiriya chitta.
But Sarah, okay, I'm sorry, but Sopana, Kiriya, or either Kusala before become Arahata, so all fall into Dan or Sila or Panya.
And just because there's quite a bit of confusion, so the 24 Kama Vatra, we're just talking about sense sphere cheetahs, 24 Kama Vatra Sobana cheetahs, 8 Kusala, 8 Vipaka, and 8 Kiriya in the case of the Arhat. So for the Arahat, only Vipaka or Kiriya.
Okay, thank
and there are 30 cheetahs which are asobana cheetahs. So cheetahs are either sobana or asobana. So the 30 asobana cheetahs are what, Haji?
30 Sopana, which does not include beautiful Jetsika. Akusala, all Akusala, and like seeing, hearing, smelling 10, and then another, I'm not sure, but I know that it does not include beautiful jealousy.
Right. So all 12 kinds of akusala cheetahs and all 18 kinds of cheetahs without root are hetuka cheetahs, like Panchadwara Vajana and seeing and so on, all are hetuka cheetahs. So cheetahs are either sobana or asobana. And in the case of the Arahat, they can only be sobana, but without kusala. So whilst taking a bath, it's very simple. If it's not vipaka or ahetuka kiriya, it has to be sobana kiriya, no matter how it's classified, no matter whether you call the metta, sila or dana or whatever. But it has to be sobana, that's all.
Thank you.
Does Arahata have Kiriya Chitta, which is not wholesome?
Yes, the Kiriya Chitta without a beautiful Chetasika.
So can Arahata have Akusala Chitta, 12?
No.
Some?
No, not at all.
Not at all. And Ahetuka Chitta, how many?
10, seeing, hearing, smelling, Pancha Thawara, Manot Thawara with Chitta, Sampatichana, am I right? I'm not sure.
And also?
Santirna, what? No. Sampatichana, Santirna, and other.
What else?
I don't know the exact Chitta, but I can understand that.
How many? Ahetuka Chittas are there.
Okay, cancel. I don't know this number.
I just told you the answer.
18.
So, how many can Arahata have?
I mean, 18 ahetuka.
Or 18?
12 is akusala, that is cannot. And no. I'm not sure about the numbers. I'm sorry.
Just ask for sure.
What is the question?
If we talk one by one, we can remember.
What all ahetuka chitta
And Arahanta have all vipaka, ahetuka vipaka.
I think vipaka, yes. No, I'm not sure. Is vipaka not apus? Yes.
And how many kiriya chitta Arahata have?
I mean, all kinds.
Ahetuka kiriya.
It's 2 for, I think, everyone also, not only Arahata.
For Arahata, how many?
Oh.
That's why we learn to understand the nature of chitta, whether it is kusala or akusala or vipaka or kiriya. Otherwise, we cannot understand the difference between puthujna and arhata, or sotapanna and arhata.
Yes.
And what is the innermost now?
Chitta.
Yes, we talk about many things, see, but what about that reality, the characteristic which we used to say, it experiences an object. Even right now, it's there. So listen to the teachings anywhere to consider, to understand the truth, that it is just now to be understood as it is, like seeing now. Is there enough condition to understand it as it is? Or it's now developing from hearing and considering little by little and understand a different level of understanding? Just talking about the story? Or is the moment of reaching or attending or being aware at seeing now?
Not at all.
Reality, which just experience, see? It takes time, but it has to be clear understanding of the difference between all realities one by one, little by little. Like we're talking about sopana citta and kusala citta. See, kusala condition, vipaka, because kusala is the cause. But kiriya is not the cause, but it's wholesome, it's beautiful, but it does not condition any vipaka. That's why it is kiriya, not kusala. So anytime we use the word kusala, it is the cause which can produce result. But when we talk about kiriya, it cannot condition any vipaka citta at all, or any citta after death. And before death, even such good deeds does not bring result because it is not kusala, but it is kiriya. So for Arahata, is there kamma pacaya?
No.
Really?
Kamma pacaya. We see sahajata kamma pacaya.
Right. Two kinds of kamma pacaya. And is the cetana arising with citta, arahata citta?
Yes.
It be the nanakni kamma pacaya?
No.
But it can be just Sahajatapati.
Yes.
It cannot produce a later result, but it has to be there as a Sahachata, but not will produce result.
Not Nana.
So what the Arahata gets before death is the result of previous deeds, not after he becoming Arahata anymore. No matter it's seeing, hearing, or what.
Nana Kanika just means possessed, means Nana, it's the same word in Thai. Nana means other, Kanika means moment, so possessed of another moment. So it doesn't, in the case of Arahatas, they don't have that one. But I appreciate you mentioning that, Tanajan, because that helps to clarify that for me too.
So also Hajit, so that 18 are Hetuka Chitta, 15 are Vipaka, and 3 are Ahetuka Kiriya Chitta. So the 3 that are Ahetuka Kiriya are the Panchadwara Vajana, the Mano Dwara Vajana, and the 3rd is the Hasitupada. So when there's a question of whether the Arahat has all of them, the answer is yes, because the Arahat has the Hasitupada. But for others, like for us, only 2 kinds of Ahetuka Kiriya Chitas. Subtle details and tricky questions that Ajahn asks.
To be wise to the tricky reality.
That's why, like with Wilhelm's questions, one has to consider the points again and again, like why do we use the word sobana instead of just kusala, or why do we talk about different kinds of kiriya chitas? Some are sobana kiriya and some are sobana, and why doesn't the layperson, why doesn't the anagami have 18 of these ahetuka kiriya chitas? But the Arahat does. So one has to just consider again and again. And as I mentioned to Wilhelm, just gradually teasing out the idea of self, understanding that what arises now are just different realities arising in different conditioned ways.
Thank you.
And like you said at the beginning, yes, we know what you mean. So often we know what is meant, but still often there is something not quite right in the understanding. So it's good to kind of consider the point again and again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Does anyone else have anything they would like to bring up today, as there's not a lot of time left? Alberto or Anne-Lee or anyone?
I got the impression from Sukin that a non-arahat cannot cannot eat kusala. I got the impression from the discussion from Sukin before starting with all the explanations about arahat, that the question was, can we do bath or eating kusala?
It's not a case of It's not a case of cannot, but the reality is that it's not.
It's not. But if we are mindful eating,
What do you mean by mindful eating?
that you know when you take what you do is that you take up the food, that you wish this is showing. When you are mindful with this, is that not kusala?
Well, depends what we mean by mindful, because we're all familiar with the form of words that the Buddha gave when describing how the monk eats his food. But just repeating those words or thinking along those lines doesn't make the citta kusala.
But being with the experience from the food, from the movement,
well, then if it's if there's awareness of something else, it's not awareness of eating. When you say the movement, what movement are you referring to?
when you move the hand, when you take the food, when you smell the food.
Yes, but what, when you say awareness of when you take the food, what is the reality of that moment? Why is that moment awareness? You're referring to the conventional idea of awareness, I think, not the mindfulness that is the wholesome mental factor, the wholesome satipatthana, that is awareness accompanied by understanding. So mindful eating, as one hears it talked about, is not really what is mindfulness at the time of eating. So for the ordinary person, as we've said before, the norm during the day is akusala citta, not strong akusala, but just it's not any particular kind of wholesomeness. So it has to be akusala. And trying to eat mindfully, for example, does not make the eating kusala. So as you've heard us explain many times, we don't think about the situation. It's a matter of what reality is appearing at the present moment. Is there wholesomeness when one is brushing one's teeth? Is that kusala? So why would it be kusala when one is eating, when eating is an object of such enjoyment for us?
Why should it not be kusala?
Because it's because of the accumulated tendency of liking the taste of food. How much accumulation of wholesome moments are there compared to the unwholesome? How strong are the accumulated tendencies, the wholesome and unwholesome accumulated tendencies, respectively? There's no reason why there can't be kusala citta, but the reality is that until kusala has been developed to a very high degree, that our eating and other daily activities will not have a good kusala citta arising with them.
What about now when we're having a Dhamma discussion? Are all the cittas kusala now?
Yeah, it depends if we really do it with good intention, I think. If it is not too have a lot of knowledge you can be proud of. But if it is indeed to learn about the Dhamma, to live the Dhamma, I think it is good.
What about after moments of seeing and hearing, looking at the pictures on the screen, looking out of the window, hearing bird noise, hearing different voices, any attachment, any ignorance?
There is.
What about moments of thinking about one's next meal, or moments of thinking about what one needs to get done in the day? Isn't there a lot of attachment and ignorance even now, even when we're discussing Dharma?
Yes, there is coming. There is. I see that there is liking and disliking in me, in myself. But if I do not feed the disliking, if I just let it go and try to be there completely with attention.
Isn't this back to the idea of I that can let it go or not feed the attachment, or that can be aware, rather than just understanding that there's bound to be attachment, different kinds of reality, and none of them are what I can do?
Is the aim to try to have more kusala all the time? Or is the aim taught by the Buddha to have more understanding of what is appearing at the present moment?
The understanding from what is appearing at the present moment. But
so what is appearing will be what is arising naturally, not because one is trying to have kusala or trying to eat mindfully or something like that.
if I eat mindfully, then I know that I am eating. Then I know.
Well, everyone knows they're eating when they're eating, but
Well,
even when you're eating mindfully, as you put it, there must be other thoughts going on as well. There can't just be thoughts of the eating. That's impossible, because there are always multiple levels of thinking going on in the mind.
Jyotika, the reason why Haji brought this question up in the first place is because we've heard many times that if it is kusala, it falls either under the classification of dana, sila, or bhavana. And therefore, the question here is, when you say there's mindfulness eating, while eating, eating with mindfulness, whatever you say, what is it? Is it dana? Is it a moment of generosity? You say no. A moment of sila, abstention from kusala? No. So you have to be implying that it's a moment of understanding. So what is it that understands? Is there understanding at that moment, or just an intention to eat mindfully without understanding?
Too difficult for me.
It is difficult because
I think
for all of us, because of the accumulated tendencies and the lack of developed understanding. But that's why we're having these discussions, to clarify what the teaching of the Buddha really was. Did he tell people to try and eat mindfully? Or did he describe how the person of highly developed understanding, for that person, when there is eating, there are also moments of mindfulness and understanding because of the...
I think the Buddha said that, but I heard that he said, be mindful all the time.
I don't think he did.
No.
But we could have another look at the relevant passage if you think you have one.
I think, like Wilhelm said earlier, whatever we heard and thought was clear has to be considered And it has to be considered in the light that actually there are just Chitas, Chaitasikas, and Rupas, no one who can do anything. So if we read any text with the idea that I can do this, I can eat mindfully, I can stop akusala arising, then it cannot be the right understanding of the Buddha's teachings, which is that all dharmas are anatta, all dharmas arising by conditions and falling away instantly, not in anyone's control. I think it's almost time. I don't know if, someone is about to speak.
I was just saying about Jyotika, also like when talking about eating or taking a bath, it's a long story and it can be broken down into single moments, and then there is the moment of seeing, there is the moment of smelling, there is the moment of tasting, and there can be awareness of this, and there can be a moment of awareness of this moment, and even awareness of this moment is going to just be one moment or maybe two. So it's just not something like the self can even think about it, because it's the self can only think about in terms of I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I'm having a bath, but the reality is something different, because it is just in one moment and then it's gone, which cannot be said by the story of eating. Like maybe it takes longer to eat a meal than to the moment of seeing or to the moment of tasting or smelling. So it's just even the awareness is just in one moment itself. So even that, it doesn't last, and can only be accumulated instead of ignorance, I think.
Thank you all for the thinking, for the help. But now it's time. Eh?
Thanks, Jyotika.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Ajahn.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Until next time. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for all the good questions and points, Jyotika and Wilhelm and Hajit, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Swadika.
Swadika, Ajahn.
Swadika, Ajahn.
สวัสดีครับอาจารย์
Swadika, Ajahn.